Tower, Juliet Zulu Kilo with inbound details.
Juliet Zulu Kilo, Cross Tower.
Juliet Zulu Kilo VFR Warrior 2POB, approaching Nambucca at 3,500. Received Delta, request airways clearance runway 03.
Juliet Zulu Kilo, clearance not available, remain outside Class Delta airspace, expect clearance at time 10, time now 07.
Remain outside Class Delta airspace, Juliet Zulu Kilo.
This pilot is on the horns of a dilemma, and his next decision is dependent upon his situational awareness. But what is situational awareness? Well, one thing's for sure, it's a term that's bandied around by a lot of people. But what does it really mean?
Without situational awareness, you might as well be flying on pure hope.
One's ability to identify and respond to changes in the immediate environment.
It's part of airmanship, it's very important.
You really have to actually look out while concentrating and flying the plane.
I think it's knowing what other aeroplanes are in the circuit.
Knowing your surroundings well.
Maintain the big picture overview of where the aircraft is.
It's knowing where you are in the world.
This understanding of the whole environment and how it's going to interact with you.
An awareness of absolutely everything that's going on in your environment.
Whoa, there are lots of different opinions. We really need to define what SA, or situational awareness, is. Dr. Micah Ensley, who's written numerous books on the subject and is a guru of SA, says this. Situational awareness is the perception of the elements in the environment within a volume of time and space, the comprehension of their meaning and the projection of their status in the near future. Crikey, that's a little long-winded. So let's look at it from another angle. The military have simplified it into 3 core phrases. What's happened, what's happening, and what might happen. So it's knowing your past, your present, and being able to predict the future. But situational awareness is tricky to define. So let's strip back the layers. The first thing you need to consider is your own mental toughness. As someone who should know is Dr. Sandy Gordon, a sports psychologist and advisor to the Australian cricket team.
Characteristics of mentally tough performers are what you'd expect. People who perform well under pressure consistently, and they bounce back from adversity. They deal with failure very, very well. Mentally tough people are also able to keep going when they're successful. That's what you need to fill your head with, the success images, because that's what you'll get more of. If you focus on what not to do and weaknesses, that's what you'll get. You'll get more of them, because what you focus on grows. You want to focus on solutions, you want to focus on things that work. If I asked you to not think of a pink fluffy elephant, don't think of a pink fluffy elephant. You can't help yourself. Oh, there's that thing on the dice, you know, the fluffy pink elephant in the car. Because your brain doesn't distinguish between do's and don'ts. So fill your brain, fill your headspace with do's, things that you want.
We do know that pilots that have what we call mental baggage that goes along with them in the aircraft, like high levels of stress, and maybe financial or personal difficulties, if they take that on board the aircraft with them, that's potentially a problem, because part of their mind is worrying about the problems that they may have, and they're therefore not devoting all their mental resources to the flying task. Now, if it's a simple flying task, it may happen without too much drama, but if an emergency happens or the workload suddenly goes up, then they've got all this distracting, mental baggage in the background that can interfere with their ability to handle the situation as well as they might.
So now that your brain is tuned up, what about your body? Exercise and good nutrition contribute to being able to think clearly and keep a heightened awareness. If you're not fit, you could compromise the way you make decisions, and the wrong decision can be fatal. If you get between half an hour and an hour of exercise on most days, this can help you relax and reduce stress, gain more energy, and even help you sleep better. It's part of making you an all-round professional.
There are a lot of things that a pilot can do prior to flight to help make sure that they perform adequately during the flight. And these things include fatigue, making sure that the pilot gets an adequate rest the night before the flight, making sure they've eaten, making sure they've had enough to drink so that they're adequately hydrated, because low blood sugar and dehydration can affect the performance of the brain, which is going to clearly affect your ability to maintain situational awareness. Other things include the effect of alcohol and drugs. Clearly they can affect your cognitive performance as well. And stress. making sure that you're not worrying about other issues when you really should be concentrating on flying.
We're preparing not just 15 minutes before a flight, we're preparing 5 and 6 days before a flight. So I'm here in Perth, Australia, 12 hours out of my time zone. I've been here for 8 days already. The first 3 days I came here just to start to transition. And then I also watch what I eat, watch how I sleep, watch what I drink. I don't drink any caffeine during the race week so I can go to bed on time. So it's a matter of being prepared really a long time in advance for one of these kinds of flights.
Bit by bit, we're putting together the elements that make up good situational awareness. Now it's time to look at how we should prepare for a flight.
I personally think a flight starts weeks ahead. If you said to me, go flying right now, I would say, okay, I can go flying right now, but actually you need time to think about it. You cannot plan a flight enough. There's no such thing as over-planning a flight. And asking what if this happens? What if the weather's not very good? What if the grass is waterlogged? What if the fuel drain shows water in it? What if, if you have a plan for every what if, then you're going to be pretty well prepared.
Imagery or visualization is about mentally rehearsing the what ifs, seeing yourself doing it masterfully, successfully, and feeling your confidence from doing that, but also helping you focus at the right time.
The command of an aeroplane doesn't just start the moment you get into an aeroplane, nor are the skills all built in an aeroplane. Everything plays its part, the theory training, the simulator training, the whole lot. We have found that there is an extreme connection between the confidence of the person in their everyday life and their confidence and then competency in the air. And so we introduced this program through Toastmasters and other leadership activities, camping, trips away, hangar flying sessions where we sit down. Those things are important to building the command and leadership that allows the person to confidently add up the situation and take command.
I'm going Bankstown to Cowra and back today. And in addition to all the usual stuff, like checking the weather and having current maps and charts, I've been thinking about the flight for about a week, visualising all aspects and considering the what-ifs. Things like planning the safest route, not necessarily the most direct. So I've planned via Katoomba due to the terrain. That way, in an extreme emergency, I'll have some options and won't have to land in Yowie and Panther country. Well, I've finished all my planning. It's time to go flying. The last thing I'm going to do is clean the windshield. Might seem like a little thing, but it's not. Bugs and dirt can create focal traps for my eyes, and I need to be looking out.
Good situational awareness, if a pilot has it, allows that pilot to have enough spare mental capacity that they can plan for the next step in the flight. So if they're coming up to a reporting point, they can make sure that they're on the correct frequency well ahead of that position. And if they're getting to a point where they have to make an inbound radio call, then they're on the right frequency, they've got the data ready to transmit well ahead of the point where they need to actually do it, so that they're not rushed when they get to that point. And if they're rushed when they get there, there's a potential for that to be missed or be delayed, and that can obviously cause its own problems.
Preparation is the key, so everything I need is at my fingertips, like maps and charts. It's also about doing tasks when there's low workload, to lessen the demand in high workload times.
SA is a little bit natural. Some people just have a better ability to take in information and process it rapidly and keep spare capacity, but we can develop situational awareness through training, and looking at preparation is probably the biggest point. And I use the same philosophy when I'm in my race plane. What we're doing there is we are planning out absolutely every single thing that can happen, everything we want to happen, and everything that might happen that we don't necessarily want to happen. When we get in the environment itself, my brain is very clear about what it is expecting to see. So I'm very aware on where the ground should be, where the pylons should be, and they're not surprising me, and it means that I've got a lot of spare capacity to deal with anything else that pops up.
You can never be too prepared before you get in the aircraft. Sometimes you might feel that it's to the point of you being anal about it. But I've never been too prepared for being in an aircraft, because every time I've thought I've had everything shacked and knew it was going to happen during a particular flight, something would come up out of left field that I just was not expecting. But because I had done the preparation, whether it be, well, you name the little facet that we did the preparation for, it wasn't a big drama. Every time I've gone up for a quick flight, because we always do it this way, generally that's when I got myself in trouble.
So how do you know when you're losing SA? Well, there are some telltale signs, like being fatigued, stressed, or becoming fixated on the one thing. You've got to learn to recognize when this is happening and refocus. Always ask yourself the question, do I have the full picture?
Most of the times whenever I've lost SA have been because, for a number of reasons, but generally I can always bring it down to one fact, and that's being distracted from flying the aircraft, whether it be being bore-sighted on looking at something on the ground, getting distracted by trying to decipher something on a chart, and not paying attention to my instruments. It's been imprinted in my brain, if you will, about losing SA. It's always been about doing something either by horsing around or something that I didn't plan to do. At the moment's decision, I went and decided to do something different in the aircraft than I normally do.
Early in my Air Force career, I was flying F-18s, and we were in just a training mission. We were strafing a target, so using the gun, diving at the ground, you pull the trigger, you shoot about 100 rounds a second into that target, and then you stop the shot and you pull away from the ground. You miss the ground by 200 to 300 feet on this particular pass. So I rolled in, I put the pipper on the target. The aircraft ranging system had a bit of an error, but instead of keeping my SA of what's important to me when I'm diving at the ground, my focus got drawn in. I was looking at all of the ranging and all of the target symbology, and I was looking at the target itself. And I had the classic case of target fixation, and I lost SA on the ground. I drove all the way in, not realizing there was an issue, even though I've been in the dive a long time. I squeezed the trigger, and what in fact saved my life is I only had one round remaining. So when I pulled the trigger, rather than the gun firing for a burst, one round came up. It's just a pop, and that was enough to then go, something's wrong. I then noticed that the ground was very close to me. I initiated a maximum G recovery, and I missed the ground by 14 feet. So very close to killing myself, all because I lost track of what was very important at the time, and that is the ground was the most important thing to me. Trying to get an accurate score was secondary to that. I reversed those two and concentrated on the score and not the ground, and the ground nearly won.
We were flying one day. It was an early morning flight, night into early morning. It was towards the end of a relatively long line period. I relinquished controls to my co-pilot, and the next minute I realized I was waking up from a bit of a nano nap, better than anything, because we were bored. The worst part was that when I woke up for no apparent reason, the guy who was supposed to be flying the aircraft, he was asleep as well. And worse off, my air crewman was asleep as well, and I didn't know how long everybody had been asleep. Fortunately, it had just been a matter of seconds or minutes. But again, that scared us all, and quickly made a beeline back to the ship, and the ship was, of course, asking why we were home early. But we've had enough today, and we're going to go home and land. But it was just one of those times when it was, you know, the standard milk run, just normal ops that we'd done for months at a time. And yeah, we just got ourselves in a situation where, yeah, for the moment we were lost SA, because we didn't know where the heck we were when all three of us, you know, woke up and figured out where we were. And it took a couple of minutes to determine where the ship was and start working our way back home. And that certainly woke us up to, again, the idea of perhaps taking things a little bit too complacently, and not having the appropriate stress or seriousness about the flight, where again we lost SA.
It was a flight from Bankstown in an old Cherokee 180, which was a brand new aeroplane in those days. This is back in the 60s. The weather wasn't very good, and I spoke to a few people who said, you might get through if instead of going due west against the higher terrain, head southwest over the Wallandilly River catchment, lower terrain, and fly a circle around the back of the lower terrain and then fly north and you'll get to Bathurst. Maybe. So I departed, and I have to say that approaching the Wallandilly catchment, which is only 10 minutes flying from Bankstown, I was becoming concerned that the cloud was quite low. I ignored that concern and I persisted, and before I knew it I was in cloud. The aeroplane though was a new aeroplane and had a basic instrument panel, so I thought I'll climb up through this, because I do recall that even though I went into cloud it was thin because it was very bright. I think I probably got out of it at about 8,000 feet on top of this cloud, and I thought, we're not going to Bathurst. We've got to go home. And I thought, well, don't panic, take your time, think this through and decide what you're going to do. I considered, all right, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to fly back to Bankstown. I'm going to fly reciprocal heading and headings and times and all the rest of it, and I thought I had it pretty well worked out. Just before I turned, I saw a hole in the cloud, and I looked down and I identified the reservoir which is near Cowra. And I thought, my God, it's been a long time since you actually went into cloud. You're near Cowra. So I'd lost all track of time in preparing myself. Anyway, I turned around, flew back. On time, I thought, it's time to descend and I'll be clear of the high terrain of the Blue Mountains and the catchment area. I descended and I broke out of the cloud at about 500 feet above the mountains. And I squeezed through between the cloud and the terrain, which fortunately was lowering now, about where the Oaks is on the Sydney terminal chart, and got back to Bankstown. The passengers thought it was great. They had no idea that I'd nearly killed them. And they didn't care about missing the air show, they just thought this was fantastic. But more was to come. When I refueled the aeroplane, I had less than 20 minutes of fuel left. And I thought to myself, when I reflected on this thing, and I still reflect on it, I thought to myself, why did you get to Cowra so quickly? And the answer was quite obvious. I had a pretty strong southeasterly tailwind and good ground speed. Why was your timing out coming back? I was flying into a headwind, and yet I just worked my times on my TAS. That's why I descended too early and nearly flew into the mountains. Why did you nearly run out of fuel? Well, you had this unplanned climb to 8,000 feet in a 180 Cherokee, which is a big engine. And then you had this long flight back into the headwind. And you hadn't been full to start with because there were 4 persons on board. The soul searching after that flight, I've never forgotten it. The basic lessons I learned, even before I got to Bankstown and saw that the weather was not really good, a lot of the things that I was thinking about in flight, I should have thought about the night before when I was doing the planning. All the what ifs. What if I have to turn around? What if I get halfway there and the weather's bad? But I hadn't. And yet I was a 500-hour private pilot. Yeah, that's an experience I'll never forget.
Situational awareness is far more than see and avoid. But obviously when you're flying VFR, looking out is critical to your survival. So it's important that you have well-rehearsed and appropriate scanning techniques. You need to be able to take in a lot of information from different places at the same time.
One of the physiological limitations of seeing is what we call empty field myopia. And that's a situation where your eyes adopt their natural rest position at about 1 metre of focal point, so that you're not seeing into the distance beyond that. And that happens when there's nothing to see out in the visual world. Now, there are two ways to avoid that. One is to have an adequate scan happening so that you look around you all the time, in and out of the aircraft, to help build an accurate mental model of what's happening around you. And the other way is to maintain a clean windscreen, because clearly if the windscreen's dirty, it's going to make it harder to see through it. And a dirty windscreen can create what we call a focal trap, where again your focal point is trapped, as we say, at 1 metre or so distant from you, because the object on the windscreen is what you're focusing on. And again, you're no longer looking beyond the windscreen at what might be out in front of you. Research has been done on how pilots do visual scanning in the aircraft. And it's interesting in that most pilots, as we've found, tend to scan mainly at the front of the aircraft, which is thought to be because they're sitting in the aircraft facing forward and that's where they're going. And that's why they tend to scan predominantly ahead of the aircraft. The difficulty with that is that some of the threats might be coming from the left or the right of the aircraft, and that's not being looked at. So it's important for pilots to look to the left, to the right, and in front of the aircraft in a regular and consistent way to make sure that they can see any threat that might be coming their way. One of the recommended scanning techniques is to look at an area outside the aircraft for only a very short period of time, maybe 1 or 2 seconds, no more than 3 seconds, and then to move the eyes 10 degrees and look at that new part of the airspace for 1 or 2 seconds, and keep doing that across the whole visual field. And that needs to be regularly and consistently done. The important part of the scan is to make sure that it's done consistently and repetitively in order to help build this accurate mental model of what's happening outside the aircraft and what's about to happen.
If the visual information is not precise, then you can't at all build the situation correctly. So if you look at most textbooks, they will show the horizon and the instrument panel in sharp focus, for example. That cannot happen. The human eye doesn't have a depth of field that will allow that. And the best test is to put your fingers out like that and look at your fingernail in sharp focus. And then while you're looking at that in sharp focus, observe the horizon. It will be a blur. Now, if you're flying along looking at your instrument panel in sharp focus, the other aircraft or bird or weather is a blur and is not coming into your situation awareness. So when you look outside for any reason, even if it's not just to observe traffic, it's just to see the horizon, you still must accommodate the eyes to that focal length. You must look. You can look at the wingtip first and see the rivet in sharp focus, or you can look at a house in the distance and see it in sharp focus, but you must do that all the time.
You know, flying's a lot like playing music. To be good, you've got to practice, practice, practice. And if you practice maintaining situational awareness, it becomes second nature. You reach a point where you don't have to think about it at all. And that means when things don't go according to plan, you'll recognise it right away.
When you're first learning to fly, the big thing is just to concentrate on how to fly the aircraft in the perfect environment. And then the emergencies will be introduced, the glide approaches, the engine failure after takeoff, all those types of things. Once you've got your license, it's very, very important that you continue to train yourself in that environment, because the instructor's now gone. You really have to continue to teach yourself and test yourself. Don't put yourself in bad environments. You know, don't break any rules, don't break any laws, look after the engine when you're doing all these things, but make sure you give yourself challenges in the flying. Don't just get up there and go, hey, I'm a pilot, look, I can see the ground, how good is it, you know, check me out. Make sure that you are always improving, and typically you can't really improve that much from flying straight and level. After you can do it, where you can improve is dealing with emergencies, and one day you may be the hero that landed the plane successfully on a road, didn't hurt anyone, didn't hurt yourself, didn't hurt the plane. That's not a bad incentive to go and practice.
So if you want to be a long-term professional in aviation, you're going to need to take situational awareness seriously. And one group of people who do are the airlines.
If a pilot seriously wants to move into an airline operation, they need to focus not just on their technical skills of being able to fly the aeroplane, but a strong focus on the non-technical skills. decision making, threat and error management, situational awareness are all very high priorities that must be developed if a pilot wants to move into airline operations. In regard to the training at QantasLink, we'll start with our initial trainees with ground schools, where during normal induction we'll talk to them about human factors, how situational awareness is one of the elements of human factors, what to look for in relation to what are the indicators that situational awareness may be being lost. We then move into simulator programs where we don't just train the manipulative skills of how to fly a Dash 8 aircraft. We will culminate in line-orientated flights where it requires a flight crew member new to the company to demonstrate their ability to maintain situational awareness of the aircraft where it is over a complete route and ensure that the operations are compliant.
We've covered a lot of ground here, so let's go back to our pilot Sheldon, who's attempting to enter Coffs Harbour Class D airspace. But first let's rewind a little to see how he prepared. It's good to see our pilot is putting the what-ifs into his planning process and preparing himself for the event if he doesn't get a clearance.
Kilo, clearance is not available. Remain outside Class Delta airspace.
Remain outside Class Delta airspace, Juliet Kilo.
His plan included doing an orbit away from the reporting point.
Kilo, traffic is Piper Warrior tracking coastal southbound, not above 1,000, tracking overland, should be passing Mundadjan Head around this time.
Juliet Kilo, roger, have the traffic sighted.
Juliet Kilo, clear to visual approach for runway 03, report final.
Clear visual approach runway 03, Juliet Kilo. And Juliet Kilo's final 03 full stop.
Juliet Kilo, roll through after landing and vacate Delta, runway 03, clear to land.
Roll through, vacate Delta, clear to land, Juliet Kilo.
Okay, so what have we learnt? You have to have mental toughness and be physically fit. Practice, practice, practice. Thoroughly plan every flight. Consider the what-ifs. Know your aircraft inside out. Look out and scan. And at every opportunity, strive to improve your situational awareness. One day, it may save your life.